then I couldn't even tell you how many sort of chemicals or whatever is in the food that you're eating, and apparently it's all good, but you've got
to wonder what it does to you. We just don't know yet.
We've got that podcast coming up with
Corey's brother.
I don't know enough about it, and I don't want to speak about it too much. But we got a podcast coming up with Corey's, our very good friend's brother, and he's talking about the way that they're now wanting to X-ray food. So instead of spraying it with chemicals, it's now X-rayed and
X-rayed,
and all the bugs and all the diseases and everything's killed by that way. So very low levels of radiation. Whether that's better or worse, I don't know. That's why we're doing the podcast. So
so I think we need to take a bit more seriously the possible effects on our bodies, short term and long term, of ingesting all these chemicals in our life, everywhere. And it sounds like a hippie thing to worry about, but it's not. Like, we really... I don't know. What makes us all think we're all so tough, it'll be fine? Seriously, it may actually be a lot of the reason why cancers are around today.
You got everything. You got fucking... whatever, cancer, depression. How many types of cancer? Some cancers now, you got to pick, sort of like, I'm going to get cancer, but what sort of cancer do I want? Apparently in the year 2040 or something, 1 in 2 people will have cancer in Western countries. It's something fucking ridiculous. It's sort of like, I'd rather fucking, lung cancer than testicular cancer. I'd rather, what?
Cancer and depression are just a reflection of our society at large, of what is actually going on. We are sick. We are sick mentally and we are sick physically.
Depression's especially, it's sort of like, why are you depressed? Everything's all right. You've got your house, you've worked hard, you've lived your life. But, hold on. You've spent 9 hours a day in an office block under the fucking, under a building that you've never seen sunlight. You get your 2 days off a week. That might not be very natural for the human body to have to endure.
Maybe because you're trying to satisfy urges that simply are not natural urges and desires of the human. There is no real satisfaction and happiness that you're going to get from buying that car. And that's why you're depressed, because you're satisfying the wrong desires and urges. You need to connect yourself.
Follow the crowd.
Also, I think with pesticides and that, I think when you use the land in such a way, you can damage the soil where it can't be used again for a long time.
Oh yeah, certainly. Yeah.
I'm sure there are so many more problems. We're not well read up on that problem. So let's just go to the last one, and possibly one of the most important, is the climate change problem.
I'm fucking I tend to look past the climate change thing. I don't give a fuck about when someone talks about it, and I don't I find it more of just a general overview of a symptom of everything bad that's happening.
It is, it's the thing that makes us be able to link everything together. And what climate change does, it says you need to stop everything you're doing. It's not just let's look after the fish, let's look after the forest. It's everything you are doing at the moment in every aspect of society is causing this problem. Therefore, you have to revamp the whole thing. And that's why it's such an important issue. And I agree, I studied this at uni and whatever, and it's an issue, but I didn't really get that hyped up about it. And even just until recently, I wasn't really that hyped up. I was just climate change, whatever, it's going to happen, we'll have to deal with it in whatever way we can. But I actually think that it's a lot more serious than I thought. And I think that it could seriously turn pretty bad.
I think it's the cherry on top. I think, we've just talked about a few different things that could go wrong. And I think, when we do talk about how fragile a society we have is, I think, the climate change situation is that cherry that it's sort of okay, sure, the planet could rise 2 degrees, 3 degrees, in 10, 20 years. But when that rise happens, there's probably a chance that the fisheries start to get depleted. A lot of people starve to death. There's a chance that, we get too many droughts from climate change. People can't grow food. There's a chance that,
all these that's things... That's going to happen.
All these things. There's a chance of economic collapse. Money isn't distributed properly. There's a chance that, and all these things, even if you get a couple of these little things, just tip over at the right time, then bang, you've got 1 billion people in dire straits.
And the thing about climate change,
you might not give a fuck about that, but the world is waking up and going, we've got options to fix this.
Climate change affects everything and everyone. So let's have a look at possible effects of climate change and the predictions. So I think at this point, they're saying there's a prediction between 2 and 6 degrees Celsius warming by 2070. And 2 is the only way... Hang on, where is this fucking thing? Even if countries fulfill all current mitigation pledges, which is not going to happen, there's no fucking way. So we're talking about policies and code of protocol people have signed, and we're going to do this and that. They're not doing it, they never have. No one's going to fulfill it fully. So even if they did, the world would still face between a 2 and a 4 degrees Celsius of warming. So no matter what happens, we are going to have to face the consequences of a between 2 and 4 degree warming. Now, it could be worse if we don't fulfill our current mitigation pledges and do something about it. It's going to be more than that. We're going to be dealing with about a 4 to 6 degree increase in temperature. Now, the things that this can affect are extreme weather events. So we're going to see a lot more extreme weather. So a lot more droughts, a lot more floods, a lot more storms, a lot more heat waves. That's why a lot of
people are talking about, like, the best word for it is climate extremes, not climate change anymore. It's sort of like climate change, is a bit of a glossy term for actually what it is. Like, it's like climate extremes actually says, because what is it? You get two.
Wow.
We've had 200-year storms in the past 10 years. We've had,
No, that's not. I don't think that's right, because if it was a climate change in the other direction and it was a cooling, we wouldn't see extreme weather events. I don't think, because
fucking oath you would if you lived in a cold country.
No, you would see colder temperatures, sure. But we're talking about the thing about warming,
massive snowfalls.
What I'm saying is the thing about warming is that it's the way that the system works with the hydrological cycle and stuff like that. When it's warmer, it makes all those systems much more sensitive to, like, storms and that, and how they're created.
Hurricanes need cold air.
It's like, okay, just think of it in tropical climates.
Yeah.
There is a lot more extreme weather events because of the heat and how it generates the hydrological cycle and exacerbates that. When you're talking about cold climates, I don't think that you'd see extremes to such lengths.
Well,
obviously you still have storms and cold snaps, but
to the extremes of sure, okay, there's not maybe gale force winds, but to the extremes that it can shut.
No, there might be gale force winds.
That is shut a city down. Sure, yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay, I can't explain myself any better than that.
No,
but I actually still think. No. I would like you to look into that later on.
But as you can see in colder climates, snow is just as destructive in some aspects as there is with in economic aspects.
Yeah.
Snow is just.
But extreme means it's like, instead of a stable climate, which kind of the pendulum stays in the middle, if you get a side of a drought, it's a bit of a drought, a bit of a flood or whatever. But we get a massive drought and a massive flood. But in a when things get warmer. But when you get things that are colder, you don't get those extremes. You only get one side of the pendulum extreme. You get really fucking cold and blizzardy and whatever. You don't get both sides. Anyway. So, Sean's just turned his face.
I'm just going to show you something. Go.
So,
go
other things that climate change affects is extreme weather displacement due to sea level rises from ice melt. So, obviously, as things get warmer, there's going to be a lot of ice melting, including the polar caps, which apparently the Arctic is going to be gone by at least 2030, if not earlier. So, from these types of ice melts, we're going to see a massive sea level rise, not only from ice melt, but also from expansion of the volume of the ocean due to temperature increases will also result in sea level rise, which will mean huge displacements of people and populations who live along the coasts. And that's going to be, I think, one of the most significant effects on the human population is going to be displacement. People are going to have to move, and we're going to have environmental refugees left, right and centre, and we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that problem alongside poverty and hunger and war and everything else. Woohoo! We've got coral reefs dying, so I think they say that the Great Barrier Reef is going to be gone by 2050, or at least dead. And with Queensland building shipping channels through it, that's not going to help. Extinction of species, like we were saying. More famine, more war, more disease, more droughts, more floods, more fires, heat waves, and disruptions in food production. So it's just going to create more havoc, more scarcity of resources, more people without the essentials of life and the things that they need to live, like for food, water, and shelter, and a place to live that is stable and safe. Did you find what you were going to show me?
No. Oh, well,
you can show me later.
There's pages of it, definitely.
Yeah,
but
you should show me later. So, let's read this. As climate change causes sea ice in our polar oceans to melt and air pollution increases the acidity of our oceans, the degradation of our oceans is gathering pace. Seawater temperatures and sea levels have already started to rise and change ocean currents. Effects will impact some of the world's poorest and most vulnerable people, as usual. They are the ones in the most vulnerable situations. But yeah, another thing that is going to be massive is the changing of the ocean currents. So that those types of changes, if anyone sees the day after tomorrow, I understand that, it's not completely scientifically valid. I wouldn't really know. I don't know that shit. But ocean currents have a massive effect on climate.
Yeah.
And so if we start to see massive temperature changes, we're going to start to see different ocean currents, and they're going to change at least local climates around the world. So you may have lived in a climate of a place of this type of climate and temperature, and then all of a sudden it's not like that anymore, and you have to completely change the way that you do things and the things that you grow for food and all that sort of thing. So let's see, the world has already warmed by 0.8 degrees Celsius since the Industrial Revolution, and most of this rise in temperature coming since the 1970s. Such rapid warming is unprecedented over at least 20,000 years. So the world has already warmed. That's definitely happened.
Yep.
But you will obviously find people who say that this is normal. So climate change, do we really have to go into the whole thing about the debate?
I can't. So.
Yeah, fuck that. If you want to go and look it up yourself. If you're still stuck on that little hurdle there where you're still not convinced, I understand. Go and research it a bit more, and then you'll be able to move forward. But there's this other really interesting thing that I saw about the methane bubbles in Siberia. Apparently, there are fields and fields of methane bubbles that are trapped underneath the ice, quite close to the surface. So what happens is, as I was describing before, the surface of the ocean absorbs what's in the atmosphere. A lot of that being CO2, methane, a lot of other different chemicals that are in the air. And most of the time, these chemicals get brought down to the bottom of the ocean and trapped very down below. They get frozen, and they don't get released until a long time, and they get converted into carbon dioxide before they actually get to the surface. But for some reason, this methane is at the surface and didn't manage to go through that process. And so it's so far to the surface that once the permafrost melts, which it is starting to melt due to temperature rise, and also sea ice melting on the surface layer, the methane gets released into the atmosphere, and methane is 30 times more toxic than carbon dioxide. And so in this way, if this methane gets released, and there is a lot of this, I think how many miles squared? I think it was like...
if 10% gets released...
a ridiculous amount of it.
If 10% gets released, that's the end of the planet as we know it. It's the end of life.
Did you look it up? 10% of the methane?
10% of the methane,
it's basically it will mean such a rapid increase in temperature, also rapid change in climate change, which means an increase in temperature for us, that it's just going to blow the whole system out of the water, to say. Anyway.
That's all right. We'll just all have to get really used to sort of like 55-degree days. That's the thing, If everyone's all right with that, then let's just keep rocking.
They say that Australia will be. Remember that talk we
Hell
went to
on
at Melbourne Uni?
We went to a conference, a lecture basically at Melbourne Uni on climate change, and even saying with a 4-degree shift in our lifetime, Australia was, some places in New South Wales, Victoria, and Queensland and Perth were holding temperatures at around about 45 degrees for a solid week. So if that's a max temperature in the space of about 20 years, we'll be holding 50 degrees for about a week. 50 degrees. So